Welcome to Retcon Air, the Plotline Repair Podcast. Like the name suggests, this is a podcast that takes a look at the plotlines of movies, sitcoms, books, video games, and even Broadway shows. What we do is we'll break down who wrote the story, how it was received by the community, and how it impacted us. We'll also take a walk through the main moments of the story, kind of zoom in a little bit, do as much as we can to explain it, and then we'll wrap up by adding what we might do differently if we had a chance to repair a piece of the plotline that just doesn't quite jive with us. And we all know this is a lot of ground to cover, so in the show notes, you'll find a table of contents with time codes to serve as a guide for each episode of Retcon Air. So even though we're talking about the comments and criticisms and, we're talking about what we would do differently, I want to be clear that this is something that we love talking about. We love these stories. We love these pieces of work. We wouldn't be doing this podcast if we weren't really into the material. So we're not just here to flame everything. We're here to just offer some constructive criticism, maybe see what we would do a little bit differently, but really just showcase how much we love these pieces of work. So, if that sounds good to you, stick around as we break down Ready Player One. Specifically the book, not the movie. And today, I am honored to welcome back my favorite bookworm and all-around amazing person, Shelby Bryar. Thank you for coming back to the show and really doing this. This is your episode. This is even mine.
Heck yeah, thanks for having me back. So I think I told you a little bit earlier, I was talking to Brice and he told me I was going to do the Ready Player One episode. And I got so excited. And I was like, oh, really? Like, I'm going to get to do this. And then he was like, oh, let me check with Devon. I'm not sure. So I was so devastated. And then he told me, yes, I was. And I was so excited. And you kind of gave me the free rein to write a portion of it. And I was so happy. Happy to be here.
You drove this whole episode, and that was really cool. So for me, typically, I do a lot of the research. I kind of put everything together, and then I just kind of assign different points to you guys so you can come in and kind of put your thoughts and stuff. But really, this is the first time the tables are turned, so I don't really have a clear line of sight of where this is going. I'm just kind of along for the ride, which is pretty exciting and intimidating. So since this is your episode, since you're great at explaining stuff anyway, why don't you take us through Writer's Room and explain what it is and go ahead and go through it.
So Writer's Room is where we briefly explain who contributed to the story we're going to break down. Since Retcon Air focuses on plotlines, we'll focus on the storyline of Ready Player One. This story was crafted by Earnest Cline, who would later go on to help write the screenplay for the movie version of the story as well. He knocked out a few different screenplays and a handful of other books, but it seems that Ready Player One is the crowning jewel in his career.
I think, arguably, Ready Player One is probably the most successful thing he's ever done. Fanboys was like a great movie, but it was very niche. Have you ever seen it?
I haven't.
So the concept is actually pretty cool. It's this group of friends, and they want to see, I think, The Phantom Menace.
Oh, okay.
Because it's before that movie comes out. But one of their friends has cancer, and he's dying, and he's terminal, and he's only got like X amount of months to live or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's the entire story of them, these group of friends trying to break into Skywalker Ranch to see an advanced screening of the movie before their friend. It's actually it's a really sincere, it's a really cool movie. It's a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
But it was a very niche audience because it was Star Wars or whatever. But, outside of that, Ready Player One clearly is his most successful property ever.
And it was the only thing that I had ever heard about with his name attached to it.
Yeah, for sure.
So do you want to take us through Deep Impact?
I would love to. So for those that don't know yet, if you guys are just joining us, Deep Impact is where we break down the way the story or plotline was received by us and the community overall. And to do that, we'll start with reviews. We'll do the top negative and a top positive comment that we found. There's a ton of reviews, a ton of different feedback on this, but we just try to hone in on one that's kind of digestible because there's a lot of stuff out here to talk about all the stuff that we talk about. So for the top positive review, I'll do that one. Yep. I got this one off Amazon.com. And again, it was hard to find because so many people have written about this book and it's just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph.
Basically what I wrote.
So, which is great though, because it means so many people love this book. So, yep. So I found a decently short one to talk about. So, quotes, I rarely give 5 stars, but for me, 5 stars means perfection, the best of the best. Ready Player One is just that. It is simply the best book I have ever read. I've read it twice this year and listened to the audiobook. Will Wheaton's narration in the audiobook is outstanding, which I didn't know that he did, so that's pretty cool. The book truly flipped all the nerdy happiness switches in my brain. There is nothing I disliked in this book. It is truly unputdownable, which I don't think I've ever heard that word before.
Interesting word. Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was in this novel living it with the characters who were excellently written. I truly felt the stakes along with the characters, all the drama, emotion, and the twists. I highly recommend this book.
Dang.
It's a pretty glowing review.
And that's pretty much how I felt too, actually.
Okay.
So, all right, I'll take the top negative one. So this 1-star review came from Goodreads.com, and it reads, quote, I originally gave this book 3 stars as harmless, lightweight fun, but my opinion of it declined as time went on. Then after reading Armada, I fully realized what a talentless, one-trick hack that Cline really is, so I changed this rating. Plus, his outraged, hardcore fans kept coming on here and telling me that I missed the point since I didn't give it 5 stars, so I might as well give them something to really be mad about. If you're one of those Cline fans who wants to whine about it in the comments, I'll just delete it and block you.
And so I read this a couple of times, and I was like, this feels like somebody who either had this kind of idea or wanted to do something similar like that, and like Cline scooped it, you know? Like he beat him to the punch, which obviously if you have kind of an original idea and you're excited about it, and then somebody does a better version of your idea,
right.
Of course you're going to be jaded, but that's how this read to me. That sounded too personal. It wasn't really about the quality of the writing.
No, that's so true.
It just seemed to kind of jaded to me anyway.
Yeah,
so.
And he thought about it for a long time because he came back and he updated his...
Yeah,
It stuck with him. Who
does that? Settle down. It's a book review, dude. Relax. Yeah. So anyway, how enough about them. What about us? How did we experience the book? How did it come to you?
Yeah, so Bri had this book sitting around in the attic, and after we moved, I noticed it, and like it was just collecting dust. It had been sitting there. None of us really talked about it. So I had a really hard time accepting that there was a book that was sitting in my attic that I hadn't read because I am a book nerd. So when the opportunity came up to cover this episode, I jumped on it, and I was so excited. I'd heard that the story was good, but never actually heard any real description of the plot, so I had no idea going into this what it was about. But I was very much looking forward to figuring out what this mystery book in my attic was all about. So, but what about you? I think your introduction to this novel was different than mine.
Quite a bit differently. So, I had heard about this book from our buddy Cam. Years ago, he and I were working on a different project. It was all like kind of video game focused, and he kept on talking about this book, Ready Player One, and it was incredible, and he was going on. And sometimes I have this stupid thing that my brain does where like if somebody hypes up something too much, like my brain just doesn't care about it. Like, all right, yeah. I'm sure it's great, but settle down. Like I have that problem with like shows on Netflix or like movies that come out. Like if you overhype something, I just can't. But then the movie came out, and I was like, oh, that's that thing that Cam was talking about. If it was good enough to make it into a movie form, it's got to have some kind of legs, right? So I checked out the movie and absolutely fell in love with the world. I'm like, okay, so my rule of thumb is if a movie's good, the book is going to be dynamic. Sure. Same thing. Like if for Harry Potter, if you're into that, if you watch the movies, you're missing out on like so much. And a lot of people just don't have any understanding of that or desire to do that. But I know that. As a fan of stuff, I know that. So my next step after falling in love with the movie was, all right, so now I need to go back and actually look at what Earnest Cline wrote. Yeah, he helped shape the screenplay, which is probably why the movie worked so well. But then I just went and found the book, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I'm like, this world is incredible. Like the way that this pace is really interesting. Like this entire universe that's so really focused on like nostalgia and pop culture, and like you could tell that Earnest Cline loves this world just like we do. Sure. And just took a really substantial crack at knocking out. You know what? I didn't put this in here, but you know what it made me think of? Did you ever read The Phantom Tollbooth?
No, but I've heard of it.
So this is like the nerd version of Phantom Tollbooth for me, where they, Phantom Tollbooth is all about like grammar and writing and like all that other stuff. This is very much sequenced around pop culture and nostalgia and all that. And I think it's just a beautifully crafted story.
Absolutely.
So, absolutely love this stuff. And so like I said in the intro, this episode is very much written and driven by you. So why don't you lead the charge, take us through There and Back Again, which is where we go through the entire story. And why don't you start us off with the synopsis?
Hold on, kiddos. So the story begins with a really intriguing opening, in my opinion. The situation explained to us is one that, unfortunately, I think most of our generation will understand, although the situation we all remember is very different to the one in this novel. We begin with the statement, quote, "Everyone my age remembers where they were and what they were doing when they first heard about the contest," end quote. Unfortunately, the first thing that came to my mind was 9/11.
So exactly the same thing. I think Cline does a great job of knowing how people feel about stuff, and that's a really tricky thing, not only to understand, but then to write about and to relay and get other people to connect to it. Sure. And so I remember when I was a kid, like our parents always talked about, or my mom anyway, she always talked about like the JFK assassination and how everybody remembers where they were when JFK was assassinated. Right. And I remember being told that and thinking like, that really sucks for you guys, but we'll probably never have anything like that. Sure. Clearly that's been fixed. And then very clearly, we all know where we were on September 11th when the towers fell. Like that was our JFK thing, and everybody know. And I've talked to people that were like in kindergarten when they remember the planes flying over. Like everybody remembers stuff like that. Yep. And so Cline figured out a way to try to loop that kind of emotion to another thing that was prevalent to everybody. Yeah, it wasn't as tragic as JFK, obviously.
Sure.
It was nowhere near parallel to 9/11, obviously.
Absolutely.
But the concept of everybody remembers where they were when this thing happened, that is an emotion that Earnest Cline seems to understand and figure out how to loop into a story, which is very impressive in my opinion.
Absolutely, I agree with that. We begin this story on a January morning in the year 2044 with the news of the death of James Halliday, the billionaire who was the video game designer responsible for creating Oasis, this awesome virtual reality system or universe that had basically taken over most of the day-to-day life for pretty much everybody that could afford it. There's an energy crisis and the world is overall just an awful, awful place. The news of Halliday's death is huge because he's released a video launching the biggest contest in Oasis history. 3 keys had to be found to open 3 gates to finally allow the player to locate Halliday's egg. What did you think about the video?
Oh, that was really cool. I thought it very much felt like that, like a sword in the stone kind of thing. It's a price that anybody can seek, but only one person can attain. Only one person, if you're worthy enough, you can have this prize. Even the Cave of Wonders, I'm watching the Aladdin with my daughter.
Yeah.
The Diamond in the Rough, only those who are worthy can come into this thing. It seemed to nail that kind of quest concept of anybody can try,
sure,
but you have to be worthy to actually get it.
Yep, absolutely. And for me, as we learned a bit more about Halliday through the novel, I think it totally made sense that he chose this way to announce the contest, and it felt very like Willy Wonka to me.
Oh, yeah.
But I've got to admit, at the beginning, I thought, man, this guy is full of himself to think that these people would just throw away their lives for this. But it made sense. Mm-hmm. So the rest of the opening gives us a little preview of how the contest has been going so far, and that is to say, very, very badly. Really sad. No one has made any progress, but rather than dwelling on the negative, let's go into level 1, chapter 1.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting concept is this is a thing that's been ongoing for years.
Yeah.
Typically you have something and this is the catalyst of the story and away we go. But no, this is, a lot of people have just stopped caring about this and moved on with their lives and even thought it was a farce kind of thing. And it's really interesting to jump into the story, not at the beginning, but several years into it.
Right.
And everybody's kind of dedicated their lives or completely walked away from it.
Sure.
So, level 1. We get a quick intro into our main hero, Wade Watts' life, and it's through his eyes, this orphan, that we learn that both he and the world around him have pretty much been dealt the worst hand ever.
Yeah.
We find out that Wade's dad was killed while he was looting a grocery store. And this was really fascinating to me. I'm going to talk about this in the Retcon section, but he wasn't looting an electronics store. He wasn't trying to rob a bank. He wasn't trying to hold people up. He was killed trying to get food, and my assumption is for, his girlfriend and his baby, because everybody's starving. So, and I think there's so much in that, that little thing that was glazed over.
I didn't even really think about that. My mind's blown. Are you kidding me?
And I was obsessing about how important it was of that location because it would have been totally different if he would have robbed anybody else, but it wasn't. He got shot looting a grocery store.
My heart.
And so it's very heartbreaking.
Oh yeah.
And so then it gets even worse because then we find out his mom, who's newly single and she's still in this garbage world, is trying to make ends meet by working as a daytime telemarketer and then a digital escort in the Oasis. Mm-hmm. And there's even a point where this has become so normal that Wade doesn't even question that it's happening. He just doesn't like it, knows it's kind of gross, and then blocks it out by, putting earbuds in and cranking up his movies and stuff. And then it gets even worse because the depression, it just overtakes his mom and she ends up, she's hooked on drugs now. And unfortunately, when you're, buying black market drugs in a place that's already really, really bad, she ends up getting a bad batch. And she it doesn't say specifically, but she dies. I'd imagine it was an overdose or something that was bad. Mm-hmm. And then it leaves Wade now completely on his own in this world to go live with an equally as drugged out aunt, Aunt Alice, who I hate, and then very abusive boyfriend, who we all obviously hate as well.
Yeah, so this kid has had a really rough life. It's cool that he had family to move in with, but it could have literally been anybody else and it would have been better, even not family.
Absolutely.
Aunt Alice was just awful.
Yeah.
Taking his food stamps and using her boyfriend to bully him. Mm-hmm. I can't even imagine being Wade and surviving, through that. So I was surprised by the realizations that Wade had at such a young age. He accepts that, adults can tell little white lies and they're actually meant to protect children, not to lie to them. It's just to try and keep them children while they are children. And
I think that we've all kind of had concerns about people who go into the foster system. Mm-hmm. not because they want to take care of kids, but because they want the government income that comes with that. And this is kind of a nod to that, in my opinion, that, she didn't look at Wade as like, this is my family. I'm going to take care of my family and make sure that you're safe. It's, oh, no, this is going to get us more food for sure. And I'm going to come through and I'm going to steal your stuff from you and I'm going to use you. And so you're here to benefit me.
Right.
And you should be grateful that I let you sleep in my laundry room. So it's just ridiculous.
Yep.
And so it switches a little bit here. There's kind of like a transition from like where we were to like this weird world is bullshit kind of rant that goes on. And honestly, I struggle with this probably more than anything else in the book because it felt weirdly placed in the story with everything that was going on. And it felt like this was like Ernest Cline sort of like jumping on a soapbox and just challenging existence overall. Sure. And that's fine. It's his right as an author. He can kind of say whatever he wants to. This is his story. But it just felt so disjointed and I just didn't like that. And so he's writing this as this is Wade's kind of like inner feelings about everything. And it just, that didn't gel with me. It just felt like it was so Ernest Cline that it conflicted with Wade.
Sure.
But again, it's, so Wade lives in his aunt's laundry room. That's where he gets to put all the stuff. And then it's through this conversation that we learn what happened to the planet. There's global wars. There's food shortages. There's that energy crisis that you'd mentioned. People are on food vouchers and then they live in the stacks to help conserve space. So right now, you know that there's like kind of the impoverished neighborhoods and, trailer parks and stuff like that. But this place takes it a step further where they put trailers on top of trailers on top of trailers and they stack them high because the vertical use of space is way more available than the horizontal flat normal space.
Right.
And it's just this really sad concept of the world sucks so bad that everybody's just really stacked on top of one each other and nobody has enough food to go around.
Right.
And so people just escape into the appropriately named oasis.
Yes.
Because that's the only, and there's a part where he's a kid where, his mom had to convince him to get out of the oasis to go, to sleep at night. And he's like, no, this place sucks. I don't want to be here.
Right. Why
me,
would you,
let me live and die in the oasis. I totally get that. But, shitty luck aside, we do get to meet the only person that's nice to Wade, Mrs. G.
Mrs. G.
And I think most of us can remember somebody who was kind of like a Mrs. G to us. And again, I think Cline nails that concept of, the very cool neighbor, the very cool teacher, the nice lady at the store. There's somebody in your life that just for no reason is just a sweetheart and really nice to you.
Right. And
it's cool that in this whole garbage world that Wade is stuck in, there's a Mrs. G that kind of helps him out. And I love that.
Absolutely. Yep. I agree. I think that Cline, he also did a really good job of showcasing bullying. Even in 2044, kids are kids and they say dumb things to each other. Wade was bullied both in public school and which he attended through 6th grade and then into high school.
And it's interesting because right now there's a lot of talk about cyberbullying. And when I was in school, we had assemblies, talk about like say no to drugs and, stay in school. And I don't honestly remember a whole lot about bullying. I don't remember that being as big of a conversation as much as like drugs and alcohol awareness were. Right. I think that was the biggest stuff. But it totally makes sense to me that bullying is going to be a constant no matter where you are, either in the real world and digitally. And then even when you go into this big digital universe, that bullying would be so prevalent that even, the way that people approach that, are going to be doing it in kind of an asshole way. And so that's when we meet the Sixers, these corporate buttheads.
Terrible.
Who are employed by a company called IOI. And they want to find Halliday's egg and ruin the oasis for the average user. I mean, they want to monetize it.
Yep.
And so Artemis, a popular gunter who Wade has a major cyber crush on. And then Aech, Wade's only friend outside of Mrs. G.
So we also learn a little bit about the planet that the schools are located on in the Oasis. It's a safe place with no player versus player, so no attacking each other. And the students have to go by their real names, which was a good call because I think we've all experienced playing online games with a Big Daddy 69.
Or like a Thrustmaster 420 or something insane.
Exactly. So Aech, like Wade, goes to a public school on Ludus, and he's a senior. He's even more well-known as a gunter than Artemis, and he and Wade have become research partners and really best friends online. Aech has found ways to make money online. He seems to be doing really well for himself. And then we also meet iRock. Really cool name, guy. Who is the stereotypical piece of crap kid. So the name's perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Who thinks he's better than everybody else. And for some reason, Aech puts up with him. And we don't ever really get into that. but I've always wondered why.
Yeah, like what
Why?
what was the catalyst? Was he just a douche to be a douche, or I think sometimes you have to have your Draco, you have to have your counterpart. But I think there's so like the dad wasn't explained as well as I wish, and then Iraq I don't think was explained as much as I wish.
Absolutely.
So unlike Aech, Wade is extremely poor and he's stranded on Ludus. I mean, because of his family, obviously.
Right.
And with little or no opportunities to level up his avatar, which is kind of everything for these people in this oasis.
Right.
And it's interesting to know that even in a digitally created world, real money still matters. Yeah. And having it gives you a totally different experience. And for those that don't, I mean, you're just kind of there. So I think most of the experiences that Wade has with the Oasis is on the benefit of his school system.
Right.
But then he can watch kids go off and go to the fun places and like the movie theaters and, the gross places and all that other stuff.
Sure.
But he just doesn't have the money for all that stuff. So he's completely at the mercy of like the public school equivalent of like the Oasis or whatever.
Absolutely.
And it's super sucky.
Super extremely sucky. We also get some more information on Halliday, his friend and business partner Ogden, and the birth of Oasis. So Halliday and Ogden met in high school and they played D&D together. That's where Halliday got his avatar's name, Anorak, from a British exchange student. Ooh la la. Halliday was intense, to say the least, about his interests, and he expected his friends to be just as obsessive as he was. But Ogden was the exact opposite. He handled the press portion of their business, did really well. He was a people person. Mm-hmm. Oasis was launched in 2012 and came at the perfect time as the energy crisis struck, limiting the amount of travel the average person could afford. Luckily, they launched Oasis with a one-time fee of 25 cents, which I thought was super cool because then even people like Wade, who had literally no money, he could find a quarter.
And then get on there.
And he's on Oasis.
And it was cool because it's like, there's limited everything educational in that world. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about going to the library. You don't have to worry about buying books. All that's free and clear, and you just needed a quarter to access it. And I think that was... So you were talking about Halliday in the beginning and how he seemed to be this pretentious asshole and whatever. But then you've got these moments like that where you're like, this is who this guy was. And that's a very cool thing.
Exactly. That's what started to turn me. Like, this quick into the book, I was like, oh, wait, he's not a jerk. It's okay.
And then we learn Wade's true colors as he starts to break down the first clue. In school, Wade has no issues whatsoever challenging his peers to Halliday's 80s trivia. He's dedicated his entire life to it. Everyone has a hobby, but in this world, most hobbies are universal. But it's his knowledge of Halliday's interests that proves more important, as he believes the clue to finding the copper key involves a D&D supplemental called Tomb of Horrors. And the location of this Tomb of Horrors comes to Wade when he's thinking about a line in the clue about having much to learn. He realizes that students have a lot to learn, and since the planet was only developed for schools, the Gunters would have little to no reason to search it.
So this is where the book really took off for me. Wade finds an exact replica of the D&D Tomb of Horrors, and he gets in there. Once past the many traps, which he knew about because he knows all this stuff, a Lich King challenges Wade to an old arcade game called Joust. When Wade defeats him, the Lich King transforms into Anorak, and he gives Wade the copper key, which is inscribed with the clue for the location of the first gate. Wade, being the awesome and obsessed nerd that he is, knows exactly where to go to search for the gate, and he's trying to decide if he should continue or log off because he's obviously super tired.
Right.
And that's when a mystery avatar appears.
It's Artemis.
Of course it's Artemis, but what are the actual chances?
Right?
Like, what?
So Artemis is shook that someone else found the tomb, and she assumes Wade, a.k.a. Parzival, which is a great name, lost to the Lich King, as she had been doing for weeks. And then she's pissed when she opens the online scoreboard and realizes that he's the first Gunter to make it on there. She gets over it, she lets him go. Competition apparently brings out the best in her. And then what does the idiot Wade do on his way out?
He gives her a clue so that she can beat the Lich King too.
He sure does, because boys don't think with their brain, Shelby, they think with their jousts.
Good joke.
And it doesn't matter what century it is, boys get real dumb around girls. I mean, you know that, I know that, Cline knows that.
Yeah, it happens. So Cline then takes us to Middletown, this insane recreation of Halliday's hometown in Ohio.
Aech!
The scoreboard shows that Artemis has defeated the Lich King. Wade reaches a replica of Halliday's house and wonders why Halliday was so obsessed with this time when he claimed to hate his childhood so much. Upon entering Halliday's room, Wade finds his old computer. He turns it on, plays a game, and he wins. A gate appears with a copper lock, so of course, Wade whips out his key and uses that bad boy to open up a portal.
Your writing is amazing in this. I just want to compliment
Thank you.
We learn that Gate 1 of the hunt for Halliday's egg is actually a virtual reality version of the movie War Games. Wade has to play the main character's role, including saying all of the lines at the correct time and with the correct intonation for bonus points throughout the movie to get through the gate, which is ridiculous.
And thus, flick syncs were born. So I've got to ask, Devon, is there a movie you'd feel confident jumping into like this?
So at first I was like, no, there's no way.
Right?
There's no way. Because, like, I know a lot of the dialogue and most of my conversations are like full of like movie quotes, but then it's like you have to go word for word and nail the timing and the intonation. I'm like, there's no way.
Right.
And so, but I think if I was going to be able to do it with anything, I could probably get pretty close to National Lampoon's Van Wilder because I just love that so much. It has, Ryan Reynolds doing a ton of delivery. I could probably get in there and knock it out to a certain point. Because I remember when that movie came out, like I hadn't seen anything like Ryan Reynolds before, and I was just so fascinated with his timing, his pacing, and like the way that he delivered lines.
Sure.
But I still, even that, I mean, even that's a stretch. Like I don't think I could go in there and like do line for line. Like you?
So I think the only one I'd be comfortable with is maybe Labyrinth.
Nice.
Because I was obsessed with it and watched it like maybe twice a day, every day for like a year. But that even would be a stretch. I still don't think I could do it. So back to our hero. Wade made it through the movie, right?
He sure did. And he was given the next clue for the Jade Key. And at this point, he's in serious need of some sleep.
So he logs off and gets some sleep. When he wakes up, he checks the news and he sees that Ogden has done an interview and he's encouraging the mysterious Parzival and Artemis to remain anonymous, regardless of the payout, because obviously people are going to pay them to figure out who they are.
Right.
Here we learn a little bit about Ogden's backstory, including the fact that he and Halliday had a thing for that British exchange student, and Ogden married her. So Wade contacts Aech, who is awesome and supportive as usual.
And I don't know, this part was kind of sad because in the beginning we learned that Halliday had no heirs, he had no family, and for all intents and purposes he kind of died rich and alone, which sucks. But now we get the why behind it. It's because he and his best friend had a falling out because they were both in love with the same girl and his best friend got the girl.
Yep.
So anyway, Wade, being Wade, again starts blowing his own chances and giving out hints again.
Honestly, what's up with this guy? For wanting to win, he sure is helping out the other Gunters, friends or not.
Yeah.
So Artemis has emailed Wade, and that relationship is blossoming quickly. It's speculated all over the Gunter boards that Parzival and Artemis are working together, which is a big no-no for devoted Gunters who are not already in the clans.
Right.
And it's about to get worse when Aech is the next on the scoreboard because a lot of people know that Aech and Parzival are friends.
Right.
So overnight, Parzival has absolutely blown up in the Gunter world.
Yeah, Wade is completely bombarded with emails at this point. Gunter clans want him to join them, and no way in hell that he'll do that.
Right.
Companies that'll pay him to use his avatar for marketing. He's hopeful that he can get some money and leave the stacks because obviously the stacks are terrible. He's with
awful.
So I mean, obviously you can't blame the guy for wanting to look at he's the one that's found this stuff. He's the one that's successful, and if he can kind of monetize that to get out of that, who can blame him?
Absolutely.
But then, unfortunately, IOI wants to chat with him.
And for some reason, Wade agrees to this. At a private invitation from Nola Sorrento, who is literally the worst sixer in the world, and unfortunately has a lot of power, Wade is chat linked in to see the IOI base of operations, IOI 1, and it's pretty intense. As is this whole chapter, to be honest. We get to see this awesome back and forth between Wade and Sorrento, including him completely throwing Sorrento for a loop, which may be my favorite bit of conversation in the novel. We also learn a critical piece of knowledge about the Sixers' operation. They have special rigs that allow them to switch control of a single avatar from person to person depending on who is best at the task at hand.
Ugh.
Serious cheating.
Yeah, ridiculous.
So for Wade's final offer, Sorrento announces that he knows Wade's real name.
And so all this stuff is really fascinating. The fact that there's companies dedicated to figuring out how to cheat and the value that is in your name.
Right.
And so Ogden's saying, you guys, it doesn't matter who's offering you what, you guys got to remain anonymous.
Yep.
But then Sorrento's going I know who you are.
Right.
And how scary that would be to be oh shit, so what else do you know about me,
Absolutely.
And so we find out that, Sorrento bribed the principal to look in the school records, which is highly illegal, right?
Correctamundo. So Sorrento threatens Wade, stating that IOI will blow the entire stack that he lives in if he doesn't agree to help them out. And Wade, he calls their bluff. And just like that, the IOI team shows their true colors and they blow the stack. And Mrs. G.
And so for me, this is where it's no longer a game anymore.
Right.
This isn't fun anymore. This isn't about just being popular and like trying to get money anymore. Like,
right.
So how many people lived in that stack, right? I think if I remember correctly, it was 22 stacks high.
I believe so.
And Alice's was at the top, right? So 20, and so there were multiple families in that apartment.
Yeah,
right?
I think like 15 people in that one.
And so you have multiple families and multiple trailers stacked up high, and then because they wanted to win this competition, arguably the most important competition ever.
Sure.
But this company, IOI, is willing to kill for it.
Right.
And so this is really where it turns for me. So. Yep. At this point, Wade is pissed and probably a little scared. He goes online and tells Aech what happened. And being that two other Gunters have made the scoreboard at this point, the two decide that it's best for all of them, at least, to chat and share the fact that the Sixers will literally try to kill them without hesitation. Yep. The Sixers have also realized that Ludus is the location of the first key, and they set up these force fields that will keep everybody else out of it because they're literally the absolute worst. And so a group of Gunters take all this into account, and a possible alliance is mentioned, which immediately ticks off Daito, meaning that he and Shoto leave the chat. Artemis leaves as well. We're left with only Aech and Parzival in the basement chat room. A stack of comic books falls over, leaving Parzival suspicious, and Aech rationalized that as it was just a glitch.
So in the final chapter of level 1, we see the awesome united power of the Gunters. They work together and take out the force fields surrounding the Tomb of Horrors, and the scoreboard fills with both Gunters and Sixers at this point. And Wade, after the shock of losing his home and the realization that the Sixers are, again, literal garbage, decides to buy a ticket to Columbus, the hub of Oasis and IOI. He creates a new identity and uses the marketing money to rent a room for 6 months, which will avoid any questions from the landlord. For not spending much time in the real world, like, this kid is smart.
Yeah, he's got, so, like, functionally and strategically, like, he's got some wits about him, considering how everybody around him is ridiculous and they're scrappy and, like, they're garbage, but he's got some good intelligence in him.
Absolutely. So that takes us to level 2, and I'm going to start the discussion because, let's be honest, in the beginning, it's basically just about Parzival and Artemis and their mushy romance that's blossoming.
Thank you very much.
They go on virtual dates and even end up having their first virtual kiss after they act out the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Obviously.
Interesting. Wade also has a small breakthrough in the clue for the second gate in this chapter, linking the clue to the cereal Cap'n Crunch, personal favorite when I was younger.
Yeah, it's good if you want to tear up the roof of your mouth.
Oh, that's true. When you're a kid, though, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you don't care. It's whatever. It's great.
So Parzival receives an invitation to a dance club that Ogden himself has coded to a party for Ogden's birthday, and Parzival and Artemis are having a great time until Parzival decides it's time to spill his guts, which was really tough to read.
I agree. Parzival tells Artemis that he loves her, which is ridiculous, which convinces her that they have to end all contact until the hunt is over because he's been compromised.
Okay.
That's some serious dedication to the task at hand, really. So hand it to Artemis.
Sure.
But in the midst of this teenage angst we are all feeling radiating from our buddy Parzival, the Sixers crash the party. Ogden is pissed that the dumpster...
You can tell I wrote it.
So Ogden is pissed that the dumpster fire of Sixers has crashed his party, so he, being an all-powerful avatar, completely destroys them. This chapter totally had me amped up. The next chapter, not so much.
Right? So we're taken back to Wade's apartment, and now that he's destined to be forever alone, he's made some changes. He's spent a lot of money on gear. He's got some workout equipment, which is awesome for him, and a doll, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
Men have needs, Shelby. Men have needs. So anyway, for a little while, there are still some obvious woe is me vibes coming from Wade. Due to the time he spent with Artemis, Aech has kind of given him the cold shoulder, which honestly, we've all seen that before. Yep. Super typical to have a friend who, finds a significant other, blows off their friends for them, and then, then it like ruins it and then they come back to you or whatever.
Right.
But friends usually don't dole out HJs, so, do what you want,
Sure, I guess.
Anyway. So he's at least on speaking terms with Daito and Shoto, and sometimes they even go on quests together, which is pretty cool. I like those two, that pair.
Yes.
He starts Parzival TV, a streaming POV TV that allows him to increase his income, and he's taken on a full-time job as an Oasis tech support. So again, like you were saying earlier, that he's actually pretty smart and driven, considering how little of an experience he's had with like great role models or whatever.
Right.
So he's on his own now. He's got 2 different jobs now. Yeah. He figured out how to monetize himself. So he's really doing pretty great for himself.
Absolutely.
And he also bought his own planet. which I thought was a little much. There are a few things that I struggle with as far as Wade's character, but he's been shit on his entire life and raised in a computer game, so, we got to cut him a little bit of slack here.
Absolutely.
Artemis ascends the scoreboard as she is the first to locate the Jade Key.
So around this time, this awesome artifact goes up for auction. It's called Findoro's Tablet of Finding, and it allows the owner to locate a single avatar 1 time per day. Obviously, this is going to be huge in the hunt, because as soon as someone finds a key or a gate, the owner can figure out exactly where the person is. Sorrento, with his unlimited funding from IOI, was able to outbid everyone else in the auction. Shocking. But the good news is, at the end of the chapter, Wade thinks he finally has a breakthrough in where to look for the Jade Key.
So Wade now travels as Parzival to a planet called Arcade that was coded by Halliday and created to be a massive museum. There's a special pizza shop with a Pac-Man game replica, and Wade has to get the perfect score, which he does, and he wins a special quarter, and he has absolutely no idea what he can ever use it for. Oh, wow. And Aech returns Parzival's favor and gives him a clue, which I thought was pretty nice.
Yeah, so now Aech and Artemis have the Jade Key, and Wade plays a game recreation called Zork, finds a toy whistle in a box of Cap'n Crunch, and receives the Jade Key wrapped up all nice.
The scoreboard is looking like this: Artemis, Parzival, Aech, Sorrento, and then Daito. 2 days later, Sorrento also finds the crystal key. At this point, Wade is feeling super sorry for himself, to the point of considering suicide. And he receives a call from Shoto letting him know that Daito had left something for Parzival in his will.
His what now?
Yeah.
So, Daito had been killed in the Oasis, but he'd also been brutally murdered by the Sixers in real life, thrown off his balcony. We learned that Daito and Shoto played as brothers, but they had never really met in real life. We also learned that Daito wanted Parzival to have his artifact called the Beta Capsule. It allows the owner to be Ultraman for a limited amount of time. And thanks, Parzival gives Shoto a samurai sword.
And Wade continues on his hunt for the egg. He realized the clue on his key pertains to Blade Runner. Great movie. He ends up getting in this kick-butt, totally remastered virtual version of Black Tiger, which he, of course, wins. He's given a choice of a special robot and chooses Leopardon from
Spiderman.
He chooses Leopardon from Spiderman, a version of Spider-Man.
Wouldn't have been my choice over the likes of like the Iron Giant, but to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, given the choice of anything, I'd probably go with something like Wolverine or Deadpool, something that can get hit hard and then regenerate. Yeah. But then he sees the crystal key and a large red star.
Rush 2112 album. I was so pumped to see this in here, especially with Neil's recent passing, which is obviously really, really sad. Like, so sad. But so Wade goes to a planet called Syrinx and ends up finding a replica of Alex's guitar from the 2112 tour, which I actually attended. I got to go to the 2112 tour.
Very cool.
Yeah, very cool. Huh. So Wade plays that bad boy and he receives another clue. He learns that the third gate couldn't be unlocked alone. Thank God he'd helped his friends along in the beginning, and they were all on good terms. But wait, they're not. When Wade offered up the guitar in the temple, he also received the crystal key. Sixers already knew the location of the final gate, and unfortunately, they once again had placed their shitty force fields around it. Ugh. Wade formulated a plan and emailed his hopeful team, taking us right to level 3. So this next part really threw me for a loop at first. What about you?
Yeah, like an actual what the hell moment. So Wade is in his apartment and the IOI police come to arrest him. He's got debt, he's unemployed, he's cleared his computer and melted it as the police force got to his super protected room. And he was brought to the real actual IOI headquarters next.
He is Brice right now, he's not Wade. So thankfully the testing did not include DNA verification as that was illegal, which... They took blood, but they didn't test his DNA. It was very strange.
Very confusing.
So careful to answer these questions that he was asked as Brice, the technical support guy, instead of Wade, the gunter. IOI confirms his identity, and he's officially indentured to pay off this debt that he's accumulated.
And finally, we get a little insight into Wade's plan. He had bought IOI passwords in an auction and needed to get into the intranet to use them. His hope was to bring down the shields around the third gate. And during his search, he found files on himself, Aech, Artemis, Shoto, and even Daito, including the video recording of the Sixers killing Daito in real life, and the orders from Sorrento to kill Artemis and Shoto in real life, too. So Wade has all this information on a flash drive that he stole from IOI, but what does he do with it?
He blows that popsicle joint, or whatever that saying is.
It's stand, I believe. Yes, exactly. Hot red blood dripping down his neck from removing his earphones that IOI had implanted. He just strolls right out of there.
I loved his little F you to Sorrento on the elevator security camera, too.
Sorrento is the worst, and it's always nice to see assholes get their due.
Yes.
So Wade breaks out, gets some Oasis gear from a P.O. box he had purchased, and immediately gets online to warn his friends. He also uploads all the data from his flash drive and sends his anonymous email to the media, including the fact that IOI had tried to kill him and had killed Daito. His next step is to speak with his friends.
So he goes to the basement chat room, and he actually finds that Aech, Artemis, and Shoto are all there waiting for him. They talk about the Sixers and how they're stuck at the third gate, unsure of how to get in. Wade explains the clue that he had found, how there must be 3 keys at once to open the gate. Obviously, the Sixers don't know this.
Right.
He's got this crazy call to arms ready to go out to all the Gunters, and then out of nowhere, Ogden shows up.
Ogden is another violator of the sacred oath of bro code, so no matter what he does, I still sort of don't like him.
Sure.
He shows up with plans to get all 4 of the Gunters to the safety of his own home. What a freaking guy.
Yeah, like that was so cool. And once this plan is in motion, we find out some pretty big stuff, right?
Oh, you mean that Aech is actually a girl? It's perfect. We've been talking about that online for years, especially in the early days of the interwebs. There was never really in any way, because we were talking about AIM earlier before we started, like AIM and then ICQ, like back in the early days, you had no idea if you were actually talking to somebody who was like legitimately a guy or legitimately a girl, and it was just whatever. So it's really cool that they kind of like threw that in here as well. It was part of the fun of the internet, and Cline obviously, again, really nails that.
Absolutely. I had a feeling like from the beginning, somebody had to be the opposite sex. It's just the internet. So her backstory kind of shocked me though, and I think it probably resonates with a lot of people in similar situations, which I thought was really cool. Again, Cline seems to really understand people and how to reach out to them.
Yeah.
But we didn't just learn about Aech. We also learned a little bit more about Ogden and Halliday. It turned out that Halliday felt he needed to distance himself from Ogden and his wife, as he still felt jealous that she had ended up with Ogden instead of him.
And I struggle with that. Like, I get that someone has to take the first step, and there are several friendships lost over relationships, but they did so much together.
Yeah.
And there are a ton of fish in the sea, and that was the thing that really killed me about that. Like, and it was cool that Halliday respected the relationship of his, former best friend and his wife. Like, obviously that's what should have happened, but like, Ogden and Halliday were going to be very successful. And it sounds dumb, I'm sure that the foreign exchange person was awesome, but there are women all over the world.
Right.
You didn't have to pick the one that you knew your buddy was into. You didn't have to.
Sure, absolutely. So I don't know about you, but from here to the end, I was just literally on the edge of my seat. Like, I could not put the book down. So Wade logs in, and as Parzival takes Leopardon and flies to Castle Anorak, the location of the third gate, to meet his 3 teammates.
Yes, and just like that moment in Star Wars, the entire Hunter army has shown up to fight.
Yes, it was one of those like immediate chills moments, right?
Like 100%. Like in the beginning, this whole thing I felt for like Sword in the Stone, and like how this whole cool King Arthur leading his knights to the round table into the battle, like that's what it felt like.
Yep.
And then a small droid programmed by Wade while he was indentured comes to the rescue by detonating a bomb that took out the wizards producing the force fields around the castle. The attack begins with the Gunters fighting without regard to whether they survived, and Sorrento stomping around on his own men as well as Gunters.
Garbage. He's garbage.
Yeah, he doesn't care. He just wants to win no matter who he hurts. So Shoto sacrifices himself. Parzival gets out the beta capsule and Ultramans himself so that he can destroy Sorrento then and there.
So the team makes it into the castle, minus Shoto, who had sacrificed himself, and then
they died.
Yeah, like, literally I crapped my pants almost.
it was like, wait, did everybody just really fucking die? Like, it's rare that those moments happen. Like, spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
So Rogue One, there's this beautiful moment to the end where, like, everybody dies. You're like, okay, nobody really actually died, right? But no, like, everybody died.
Yeah.
And it's rare because, like, people love sequels.
Yep.
And typically people don't kill characters off because you want to be able to make more money in the sequel.
Sure.
But this is a cool way to kind of knock that out, and it's a game after all, so why not?
Absolutely. So Wade watches as his avatar fades and then rematerializes as Extra Life appears on his screen. That damn quarter from the Pac-Man game. I knew it was going to play into the plot at some point, but I really didn't think it would be like this. What about you?
I thought it was perfect. I thought there were so many things in the book that tickle your memory, and that Extra Life came in at the perfect time and in the perfect way. I was so wrapped up in the battle and everything else going on. Like, it was like so loud.
Yeah.
Like, everything that was happening was so loud that I completely forgot about like the obscure coin from chapters and chapters and chapters ago. Right. And then all of a sudden, like, it was just back again in the perfect way. I thought it was very, very well done.
Yep, I agree. So Ogden patches Aech, Artemis, and Shoto through to Parzival. With their help, he makes it to the third gate, now hovering above the ground where the castle had been because the Sixers blew it up.
And inside the last gate is Tempest. and it's not Wade's best game. Thanks to Artemis's knowledge, he's able to score a bunch of extra credits to keep trying. The team breaks the news to Wade that he's in live broadcast and that some of the Sixers are catching up. But luckily, the competition and the pressure helped him. He wins that thing and then finds himself cast as King Arthur in Monty Python, The Holy Grail.
I had been hoping for this. I freaking love Monty Python.
Yeah, Monty, it's amazing. And Wade clears that shit.
Of course he does.
It's great. Why would you not?
Right. So Wade finds himself in a recreation of Halliday's office, no longer able to contact his team. He knows what he's got to do, so he finds an Atari to play adventure on. Finding the secret room, the Crystal Gate became a wooden door to Anorak's castle, and it seemed the effects of the Cataclysm were completely undone. So we finally see Anorak again, right?
We sure do. Anorak gives his powers to Parzival, as well as control of the Oasis. And he tells Wade the ever-important but boring realization of the Oasis is an awesome escape, but it doesn't compare to real life.
Says the man who just made a video game hunt the biggest thing the world has ever seen. But in all seriousness, it is a great lesson. We've got this life, we've got to live it.
So for sure, it's great to have games, books, movies, pretty much everything this show is about to escape to. But you can't beat interaction.
Yep.
You know, a deep conversation with a friend, seeing your significant other naked, getting white girl wasted on cello shots.
Sure.
I don't know how cool or real. I don't care how cool or real a digital world looks. It's still digital.
Yep.
So anyway, and so obviously Shelby didn't write that part. I did.
Thanks for throwing that out there.
So after Halliday leaves, Wade can again communicate with his friends. They notice the Sixers, who had also been in the gate, had been returned to the front of the castle. Parzival basically snaps his fingers and deletes them from existence. He goes full Thanos on them.
Yeah.
So he then brings his friends back, which was a good move. And then the book starts to wrap up here with Sorrento being taken into custody for all the ridiculous murder he's been making.
Seriously.
And the meeting had aired the news that Wade sent them, which is awesome.
Yes.
So we get a perfect quote from Aech when they are discussing the fact that Sorrento is part of IOI and can easily afford a good lawyer. You're right, he can, but now so can we.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
So beautiful. So the novel ends with Wade in the real world meeting Artemis, Samantha, for the first time. They kiss, it's magical, and for the first time, Wade has no desire to log back into Oasis.
Because he's got a girlfriend in real life.
I mean,
Video games could wait.
don't need video games no more. So really, that's it for Ready Player One. What'd you think of the story?
So I was honestly blown away. It came out of nowhere. It really did a great job of sucking me into this interesting world. I loved hearing more about it. Books are supposed to teleport you, and this one did that in spades, 100%. It makes total sense that they adapted this into a movie. I get a lot of the decisions that they made to change it for a broader audience, but I just think that this was just so well done. What about you?
So I was absolutely blown away by this and really mad at myself for letting it sit around so long without picking it up. It was the perfect mixture of a futuristic world, some technology, gaming, and some seriously awesome 80s references. His book was everything I didn't know I wanted to read about. At this point, all I can say is I'm anxious to see the movie so I can spend a little more time in this world.
You'll love it, like 100%.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't go into as much depth.
No, sure.
And you'll see some very clear differences between the writing in the book and then what they did with the screenplay. But the cool thing is that Earnest Cline helped co-write the screenplay, which is why it works so well. You'll absolutely love it. I really hope that you watch it and let me know how
I told Bri we needed to watch it like right away.
It's so good. All right, so here we go. If we could retcon Ready Player One, what would we change, how would we change it, and why would we change it? And since this is pretty much your story, why don't you go ahead and lead us off?
So I've been thinking about this a lot. Like since probably 2 chapters into the book, I was like, oh. Where Harry Potter and the Cursed Child was easy to retcon because we have all this history from all the different books. This piece is a standalone and was the introduction to this awesome world. My thoughts on what I'd retcon here are completely selfish and personal.
Which is fair, which I think that's fair.
So number 1, why the HE double hockey sticks did Mrs. G have to be killed? It makes me so mad. If I had my way, I'd change the story just a little bit so that she survived the attack somehow. I could see Wade buying her like a sweet little place and filling it with all these special like cat ramps and like all kinds of stuff for her cat toys.
Yeah.
But from a serious plot perspective, the only thing I think I would have been interested to see different was the relationship between Parzival and Artemis. Don't come at me, but I just think the chances of the two of them in this entire massive gaming community of the Oasis running into each other at the location of the first key was just absurd.
And very too convenient.
Yes, yeah. It was just, what?
Yeah.
The one gamer that Wade has a massive crush on and had been following online in real life.
Right.
he just runs into her. It almost seemed like Cline had the idea of a romance in his head and thought, oh, I'm not sure how to develop this, so we'll just have them run into each other.
This is going to be my meet cute, and we'll just go on from there and hope it all works out.
Right. Now, that being said, he obviously put a lot of thought into this because he did write it well, and he explained that she had been there trying for weeks while Parzival just happened to be struck by the idea and also happened to be awesome at joust. And all honestly, maybe I'm just being picky because I'm jealous of the beautiful love story. But what about you, Devon? What would you retcon?
Well, before I go into that, I think they had to kill Mrs. G because we didn't know anybody else really that we cared about in the tower. Like in the stacks, we know we hated Alice. We know we hated the boyfriend, and so he
needed ammunition.
Yeah, he needed a reason to care.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah, it sucks that all these people died, but his connection was to the only person that really mattered to him.
Right.
But I think it would have been a really nice touch if she had happened to be away at that time.
She was getting groceries.
Yeah, and then she'd
something.
come back, and then so as I'm so sorry that you lost everything. You've done so much for me.
Right.
Here, I built this place for you, and I think that still could have worked in, and I think she could have been saved, and I think that would have been awesome. I think he still could have thought that she was died to the same effect, and then have her lived, and that would have been okay.
Yep.
But I see why they pulled that trigger.
Sure, absolutely.
So for me, I thought a lot about this too, because there's clearly Earnest Cline spent so much time crafting the story and trying to do it the way that he wanted to. But then when I was going back and like really thinking about like what worked for me, what didn't, there's really only two things about it. And it's less about the story. It's more about like character development. So first, let's go into the character of Wade Watts. I know he had a tough go of it. I know he's really been shit on his whole life, but I wish he had a touch more humility in him. There were just a handful of moments to me where I felt like he was just kind of a douchebag, like in general.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't helping Artemis because he was out of the goodness of his heart. He was into her. He was trying to get her to like him.
He just wanted her. Yeah.
That was self-serving. That wasn't humility. And, he was supposed to be the worthy knight to earn this prize. He was supposed to be the one that could carry on Halliday's legacy, but it felt like for a lot of different moments, he was just kind of a prick that did this thing and chased his own ambitions. And that was really the biggest difference between the movie and the book that I think you'll notice is that the way that they write the character of Wade Watts in the movie, there's a humility to him. There's like a sweetness to him. There's like a selflessness to him. And I just didn't get that from the story. And I struggle with it a lot. But when you go through the book, especially that whole first hate speech against like the world and Christianity, and it just loses that, and it just makes him harder to connect with.
Sure.
And so I get that, he's the protagonist, and we're on this journey with him, and obviously you can't not root for him because he's going.
Right.
I just think that he could have been dealt with a little bit differently.
Yes.
That just kind of made him easier to like and, had maybe a little bit more heart.
Absolutely.
And then second, like I alluded to earlier, I would have added way more information to the intro segment about the parents, specifically the dad.
Yeah.
It would have been cool to have an entire, like, we have that kind of prologue with Halliday doing kind of his intro and like the birth of the context. But then it would have been cool to have kind of a snapshot of like the parents, like how did his mom and dad meet? What was that like? What is it like to be, two teenagers that fall in love? Because really they were around when the world fell.
Right.
And so we're told about the world falling, but we don't really get to see that. And so for me, like I said earlier, his dad didn't die robbing a bank. He didn't die stealing from an electronics store. He wasn't trying to get TVs and cool shit. He was trying to get food for his family. He died looting a grocery store.
Right.
And I think there's so much missed in that moment that I would have loved for Earnest Cline to spend some more time kind of unpacking that and spending more time there and less time on this other weird shit that happened later on with the relationships with Artemis and him. And like there were just a lot of things that were just kind of lazy and kind of convenient that would have been better served, I think, if they spent more time up front really building like how dark this world is and how scary that world is. So if they could do that, show us a little bit more about Wade, the fall of the U.S. and all that, maybe they'll do that in the sequels a little bit more. But that's what, those are the two main things that if I could change something, that's what I would change.
Yep.
So let's wrap this thing up. What do you think that he could do or should do or would do with the sequel?
So I was reading this, trying to like prepare myself before, and I was like, sequel? Huh? Because don't do that to me if there isn't actual news of the sequel. Although thinking about it, well, you know how sometimes the story is just awesome and everything you want it to be on its own?
Yeah.
Sometimes trying to make something after it, unless it's left open, doesn't work so well. But good gosh, it would be awesome if we could be immersed into this world a little bit more in an equally gripping story. I wouldn't wait to read it as it sat around in my attic gathering dust.
And so you were saying, like, is there actual news of that? So the movie that I got, my copy of Ready Player One is digital and it had a bunch of bonus features. So there's a bonus episode thing where it's the character that plays Wade Watts in the movie. I can't remember his name. He's getting popular. He like played Cyclops in the X-Men one, like the reboot of X-Men. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but he's that guy.
Yeah.
And so he goes to Earnest Cline's house because Earnest Cline he actually has a DeLorean. His garage is like covered in 80s sweat. It looks exactly like your attic right now.
Okay.
And there's a part to the end of that. I can't remember what they're talking about. They're doing something, but there's a point where Earnest Cline and the guy who plays Wade Watts, they're sitting in the DeLorean, and Earnest Cline says, "Hey, do you want to hear what the sequel is going to be about?" But they shut the door of the DeLorean, and then you just see the camera watching, the guy who plays Wade and then Earnest Cline. You see them talking to each other, and they're talking about the sequel or whatever else. So like we said before, clearly this is going to be Earnest Cline's, golden goose. This is clearly above and beyond anything else he's ever done.
Right.
So obviously it makes sense that he would be doing a sequel, but clearly he's done enough to where he's explaining it. They recorded that, so obviously I don't know if they didn't say specifically if it's the book or if it's going to be a sequel to the movie, if it's Ready Player 2 or whatever else. But yeah, there's definitely a sequel coming, so that's
so
cool.
exciting.
Well, if that's it, Shelby, thank you for hanging out with me today.
Of course.
Folks, thank you for hanging out with Shelby and myself today as we break down Ready Player One. And again, Shelby, thank you for driving this whole thing. You did 98% of this entire thing. I had to come in at the end and kind of do a couple things. So thank you. This was awesome. This is a great experience. I had so much fun going through your script. It was fun.
Good. I'm glad. I had a really good time writing it. So.
Good. I'm glad. And you can totally do more of these if you'd like.
Yes, I would love to.
So if you dig this show, please give us some feedback or a review no matter where you're listening to this show. We're on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Music, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and probably other places I can't think of. You can literally just punch Retcon Air into anywhere you are and you'll find us. If you happen to be listening to the show on a service that has some kind of ranking system, please leave some positive feedback and a kind word or two. Thank you guys. We appreciate you hanging out with us today. We'll see you next time on Retcon Air.
Woo!
And then I find out I wasn't recording.